And let's be honest, being in one of these bosun seats and having a jackhammer between your legs is still infinitely better than any other mining job that's available.
And
the money was
sounds hot. Just a little. I'm just a little hot. Yeah.
Totally hot. Jackhammer between your legs, making on George Washington's mouth, just like,
that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Yeah, come on.
History, I'd like to follow me down the rabbit hole. History, I'd like to, frankly, I want to know.
Hi, and welcome to HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck, where history is a party and everybody's coming. I'm your host, Dawn Brody, and we are HILFing today Mount Rushmore, one of the most iconic of American monuments, right? I mean, it's up there with the Statue of Liberty and the Lincoln Memorial in terms of being on a postcard and an oven mitt. And while we can all probably picture Mount Rushmore in our heads, few of us know much about it beyond the heads. I mean, even if you can name all 4 presidents featured, and less than 30% of Americans can, the story of how and why this enormous feat of engineering and total fuck job on the Native Americans came to pass. Now, we have my guest, Christine Blackburn, to thank for this HILF. She is a comedian and storyteller here in LA and the host of several wildly successful shows. Storyworthy is an epic podcast now in its 14th season. Story Smash is a live storytelling game show featuring an all-star celebrity panel of judges. And My Life in 3 Songs is her latest podcast where comedians, including Patton, Oswald, and Margaret sit down with her and discuss their lives through their favorite music. I know, right? We're going to have a blast. Let's get started.
Yay, history.
I mean, right? You are the best. And I will say, if people are a big fan of HILF, they have Christine Blackburn to thank, because I was a guest on your podcast long before I ever even thought about having my...
That's true. I think you might have been. And you also won Story Smash at least 3 times, if not 4 times. Every time you come to play Story Smash, you're like a paper in the wind. You just kind of fly in, win all the cookies, and I mean, really, the prize is cookies, and then you just fly right out the door. You're so talented.
Oh, that fills my heart. Thanks. It's so much fun when you go to a Story Smash show. It's been in one of many awesome theaters.
Yeah, it's been in, well, mostly the Improv was for 6 years, but now it's been at the Lyric Hyperion since for 2 years. It is fun. Thank you.
It is so fun. And it's like, you know, celebrities judge. You've had like Danny Zucker is a long time guy, Blaine Capatch.
Yeah. Truly, you're right. Like Wendy McClendon Covey has played several times, the actress, and also Melissa Peterman. And what's really funny, just recently we came up with a new slogan, and it's "Come for the stories, stay for the criticism." So, because basically, they critique these people's stories in just really funny ways. I mean, everything's in good fun. Nothing is too, personal or cutting, but it is hilarious. Yeah.
It's so fun. Thanks. And the top prize is fresh baked cookies made by you. Yeah. And I'll say, as a frequent winner, the cookies are delicious.
I'm telling you, I have a niece in Pittsburgh where I'm from, and my niece has a bakery, and she gave me her recipe. So...
It's for real. These aren't being squeezed out of a tube, girl. Yeah. You would have been forgiven if you were squeezing them out of a tube, for sure. And tell me about your latest podcast, My Life in 3 Songs. It's so good.
Well, I do. I'm so in love with my show, My Life in 3 Songs. You can find it at mylifein3songs.com. It's on Spotify. That's the only place you can listen to it, because we do use the music from Spotify. So when you listen to a comedian talking about their 3 songs, after they talk about the song, then we listen to the song, and then they might comment on it afterwards as well. So, I have.
And you can't do that kind of stuff on YouTube, girl. They'll shut your ass down.
That's right. Of course, it's all about music licensing, and I've had about 55 guests and some really great people like you named, and also Greg Proops and Craig Shoemaker. Just a lot of really interesting people. Now, sadly, as of early July, Spotify has taken away the program called Music Plus Talk. So now I can't record any new episodes. So I'm actually looking for a new home for My Life in 3 Songs, possibly at SiriusXM or somewhere that has music licensing. Because like you mentioned, you can't steal that.
No, they are very particular about that.
Yeah, they frown on it.
Okay, so this is probably an impossible question, but have you had a favorite episode?
Felicia Michaels.
Yeah.
All 3 songs that she brought to the table were fascinating and very, very good. See, some people bring to the table simpler songs like, oh, I loved Harry Chapin, Cats in the Cradle, or I loved Paul McCartney when he sang Blackbird. But that's fine and that's wonderful. But then there's other people who have a deeper appreciation for music and things hit them a little differently, and the reasons why it hit them, it always comes back to a moment in time when somebody's friend turned them on to this, or somebody's friend turned them on to this, or they heard their mother listening to this. I mean, there's always these moments in time where people hear a song. Also, comedian Cynthia Levin, I love her episode. And then the last episode I did was with comedian Craig Shoemaker, and that is also way up there on my top list. I adore his songs. I also adored the songs by Blank Patch, because Blaine brought forth songs like his favorite songs were Conjunction Junction.
Oh, what's your function, baby?
And that he still loves that song.
Love it.
Also, Put the Lime in the Coconut.
Oh.
That's one of Blaine's.
Wow.
And he sings it all the time. And I can't think of the other one. But, it's a lot of the songs really do correlate with the comedian, and you could see how that happened. Like, I'd love to have you on, Dawn.
Anytime.
I have a feeling a few of your songs might include something about a river or something about a boat.
Sure. Yeah, duh, right?
Right.
You got to curl
my toes. Or
my
something about the Great Mississippi. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Rolling on a river.
You've been a guest on here before too. You were a guest way back in my first season. We fucked the Elephant Man and Freaks in general.
That was great. That was great.
So much fun. And this
Yeah.
time I was like, "Hey man, I love you. Let's do this. We're back. We're in like I don't know how to count my seasons. It feels like season 5, but it's only year 3. Doesn't matter. Point is, you're back.
And I find this topic stunning. I'm just thrilled to hear about this because I've not purposely looked into the South Dakota, this whole mountain range. I haven't looked into it at all. So I'm really anxious to hear it from you.
I am so thrilled to hear that because I love getting into history subjects like these that have this unique balance of course I know what Mount Rushmore is. Everybody knows what that is. And then it's like a badly designed video game where you take 1 turn, 2 turns, and that's the end of what you know about that thing that everybody knows about. Do you know what I mean? It's just this, it's such a big, visually stunning thing. Like I said, most people can imagine it easily. But as soon as you get to the details, we're just like, it may as well have fallen out of the sky and landed there.
Yeah, my first husband, not the second, but the first, he has been to Mount Rushmore, and he told me a story about how, you're kind of driving, and you make a turn, it's right there, and that it's kind of unimpressive when you see it. Have you seen it personally?
I have. So you've never even visited it.
No.
Okay, so this is going to be so much fucking fun, Christine. I have been there twice because to your point about the driving, that is the pretty much only way to get there unless you're dropped in from a helicopter, which I don't think they do.
Right.
Yeah, you have to drive to Mount Rushmore. I drove there in the classic family road trip in the mid-1980s, sitting between my 2 big sisters, giant car.
Did you guys want to go?
Yeah, I was 5 or 6, so I don't recall wanting having any influence.
Right, of course. You had
what anyone. But yeah, no, we were stoked. This was a family trip that we had saved up forever. We were doing a real Griswold style. We're leaving rural Wisconsin and we're heading west until we see all this stuff. We went to Yellowstone. That was the point. Yeah, we stopped to Mount Rushmore. And then I went again in my late 20s, early 30s on a road trip with some buddies. We were going to Montana. And what the fuck? You got to stop at Mount Rushmore, man.
Sure.
curious to know from you is why you chose Mount Rushmore of all of the plethora of HILFs out there.
Well, because I know nothing about it. And also because it's an American monument. And I also am wondering there's so many questions about it, like how did it ever come to be? And why did they choose those people? And is it in Black Rock Forest or something? Wait, what's it in? Black Rock?
It's in the Black Hills of South Dakota.
Is it a national park?
Yes. I'm going to tell you the sources of information for this because it's been actually a patchwork of resources for this one because there isn't really a singular book that is dedicated to just the history of Mount Rushmore.
Do you think there's ever been a movie shot there? Were there like the cowboy and Indian movies there?
Sure. Well, yeah. And there's also like, what's the movie? There's a famous scene where they get on George Washington's nose. And I think a National Treasure, one of the National Treasure movies, Nick Cage gets in on this. But these are fiction, you know what I mean? That it's the setting for an action adventure or that it's sort of a destination featured in a movie is a thing. But like of the making of it, not really. My sources, and even the sculptor, who we'll get to later, there's no like official biography of him. So where I found my sources largely started with tourism videos. The videos that were made specifically to get you there, and then the ones that are played within the museum video store that are going to tell the story and show the workers and stuff like that.
Are they hilarious? Are they really old?
Some of them are very hilarious, but they're also museum videos. They're for nerds like me. You know what I mean? They're the ones I just nom.
Such a good idea.
Then there are some great podcast resources. One is American History Tellers does an awesome episode on the background of Mount Rushmore. It's fantastic. Then I found Christine. Oh my God, how much fun did I have with this guy? His name is Jason Arkles, and his podcast is called The Sculptor's Funeral. He is a sculptor himself. He teaches a variety of sculpting techniques all over the world, and he was living in Italy. And he started this podcast, The Sculptor's Funeral, because he says, I'm in Italy where all the best sculptors are dead. And he just did these, and they're really great. And he does a 2-parter on the sculptor of Mount Rushmore, and it's fantastic. And then my last most valuable resource was the Crazy Horse Memorial and the Lakota Sioux national site where they have tons of course information and perspective. So here I go. I got all this stuff, Christine. Here's my plan. I'm going to start with just your broad strokes, the stats, the origin of the idea. And for those of you who haven't ever been there and are picturing it from a still image, from someone's recollection, from a movie or whatever, I'm going to help you see it. I'm going to get you there so you understand the scope and the size and like the area around it and what is this fucking thing, right? Then we're going to talk about the sculptor. This fucking guy, okay? The craziest. This guy, I mean, the fact that we don't have a lot of these, we don't have a lot of memorials that look like this anywhere else in the United States tells you this is fucking something weird happened there, right? Then we're going to talk about the work and the workers. Because this sculptor guy was up there occasionally, but he obviously didn't do this by himself. So we're going to talk about like how technically it was done and who were the people that were up there with the tools and what tools did they have and how the hell do you even do it? And then we're going to end with crazy fuckery, the wild, some very true conspiracy theory feeling shit, and the like Native American perspective on all of this, which just kind of makes it gives you that full portrait frame with like all the color. Okay, are you ready to fuck?
I'm so excited.
Oh, okay, Christine, here we go. Now, first, my girl went, I gotta get a little drink of water, get this thing a little wetter. So the Black Hills, okay, we talked about the Black Hills of South Dakota. If you're not from the U.S. or if you are in your geography's dusty, girl, that is pretty much right in the middle, but north of the middle. So you've got North Dakota borders Canada, bam, the state right under that. The Black Hills are in the western portion of that state, kissing Wyoming. Okay, it is fucking gorgeous. It is some of the most stunning landscapes America has. We're talking forests, rushing rivers, these rock bluffs, these granite carvings, just some of the most incredible landscape in the world. Okay.
Really?
And in the midst of this Black Hills gorgeous country is a particular granite bluff. It's 500 feet tall. It is called Mount Rushmore, baby. And on the side of it, we got 4 heads, bust presidents' faces carved into this thing. And so I'm quizzing you, Christine.
Wait a minute. It's granite?
It's granite.
Like the countertop.
Word.
Wow. Amazing.
Right?
I didn't
Amazing.
know that. I never knew
It's great, right? We've got the 4 guys up there. Can you, Christine, name them?
Absolutely not.
None of them?
Washington, Jefferson,
Great.
Edison.
Okay, that's not that nuts.
No. Well, I don't even think there was a president named Edison. I was just thinking about the light bulb. Light bulb guy.
I'm not here to shame you, but no,
Okay.
Absolutely, there is no
I
Edison
see him.
president.
It's Jackson. It was Andrew Jackson and an Indian.
Okay, so you think the 4 faces on Mount Rushmore are George Washington, Thomas Jefferson,
Abraham Lincoln.
ding, ding, I'll let you say. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, girl, I'll tell you right now, you got 3 out of 4.
Okay, how about Grant?
That
Was it Grant?
that fourth one is the tricky one. It's not Grant. No, it's not an Indian. Merciful heavens.
Was it an Indian crying in the 70s because you guys litter?
No, that's not it either. But these guesses are getting more exciting. And I'll tell you what, you have just gotten, like, the good news is you passed the quiz. You got 3 out of 4. You know what I mean? D's get degrees. And you're in league if we're grading on a curve, man.
Andrew Jackson.
No. He'd look great. He's got a great face.
Oh,
It is.
yeah.
Do you want to hear what it is,
Yeah.
or do you want to guess?
No, I want it.
It's Theodore Roosevelt. Which is,
Interessante.
well, we're going to get more into the why Theodore Roosevelt, but just what you just did is what people have done, not just today, but since the thing was carved, is you go, okay, George Washington, yeah. Abraham Lincoln, duh. Thomas Jefferson, sure. And Theodore Roosevelt, what the fuck? And you always forget, is it Edison? Kind of looks like Edison. No, it's not him. He's got something on his face. What's he got on his face?
Yeah.
He's kind of tucked in the back. Yeah, but those are the 4, and you've got it exactly right, okay? The scale of this thing, okay, is this cliff is 500 feet is all on its own, and Washington's head is 60 feet tall. His nose is 21 feet tall.
Okay, a story of a building is
Mm-hmm.
typically what?
I think that
12
what I heard.
feet.
I think what I heard is that that he's like 4 or 5 stories from
stories high.
head to chin. Right?
Yeah.
It's big.
That's big.
Okay. And
That's
the timeline
big.
on this thing, you're like, when would they would have done it? Can you guess ballpark what year work
this
on
is
this
what
kind of
I'm-
thing would have started?
I'm very interested in. I'm wondering if any of the presidents actually saw it. And I guess the only option would have been Roosevelt if they built it in the 20s.
Hey, ding, ding, ding. You're doing great.
When?
I'm watching you smoke weed, and you said you didn't know anything about this, and you are fucking nailing this quiz, girl.
What
You're
year?
doing
What
great.
year?
1927 is when work began. It took 14 years before they put the tools down and said, we're done. Okay? So 1927.
14 years. That's a
14
long
years.
time.
They wrapped it up in 1941. The people living in the 20s felt, I think, very much like the people living in the 1990s, which was, well, history has come this far to us. We are the peak and pinnacle of history. We are the best thing that's ever happened. We have the best stuff that's ever been. And they were kind of right. 1927 is also when Lindbergh crosses the Atlantic in a mother-loving airplane, man. We got sound in movies. We've got people flying airplanes over the ocean. And here's the other thing. As it pertains to our subject, sister, we got cars and highways. We're taking road trips.
Oh, yeah. Of course.
My favorite thing in the world. And are they primitive? Are they hard? But this is like, you thought the railroad was cool, man. You thought the
Right.
steamship could blow your socks off, man. I mean, even Amelia Earhart sold her shit and bought a yellow car and took a road trip, because this is like driving to this shit is a big deal.
Oh, wait, who commissioned it? Who commissioned it? Who wanted it? Who paid for it? And how did they decide? Who is going on there?
Bless you. I love your questions. Are perfect. Okay, here's where we're going. Before this, so 1927 is when construction starts. You and me are now going pre-1927. How the hell do we get to construction starting on 4 presidents' faces in the side of this granite peak in the middle of fucking nowhere, right? First and foremost, a reminder, I'm going to get more detail this later. This is Indian land. This is Lakota and Sioux land. It, capital B, belongs to them. Okay, just keep that in your back pocket. But in the mid 1880s, when it's still railroads, okay, a silver mine prospector named Charles E. Rushmore is out there looking for how we can make some money. And this is, if you're a HILF fan, man, at this exact same time, Doc Holliday this is old West time.
Yeah, Doc Holliday's already found his silver in Colorado, I believe.
Oh, exactly. Well, you know that there's a lot of the gold. We know there's no gold here because that's already been tapped. That was that was 40 years ago. But there might be stuff. There might be silver. What's going on? What can we do here? And he's got a guide who's taken him through this area, and he sees this cliff, this gorgeous granite, crazy cliff that sticks out and is really noticeable. And he says, what do they call that? And the guide, of course, doing what they do for rich people they're trying to impress, says, it doesn't have a name. But from now on, we'll call it Mount Rushmore. Okay, so that's why this cliff is called Mount Rushmore.
Was granite valuable in that time?
Not really. I mean, this granite is not the same kind of granite that you would necessarily mine to make countertops. Like the materials of the cliff itself didn't appear to be valuable to anybody. You know what I mean? And I'll get to later why, because there's a lot of rock over the granite. It's why you wouldn't walk in and look, oh, that's granite. There's like stuff on the outside you have to blast away to like get to that part. Right?
Oh, so it's actually carvable. That's interesting.
Right. So this guy, Mr. Rushmore, Charles Rushmore, I don't know what the fuck he does with his mind, but now on all of our maps and all the stuff that we print from then on, it is known as Mount Rushmore, that particular spot. Flash forward now 40 years, it's the early 1920s, and South Dakota's a state, yay, and South Dakota has LeGasp, a historian, its own historian, right? And he's like, oh, South Dakota. It's the 20s. Everybody feels like, again, history has come to them. And he's standing on the edge of the 1920s like, God damn, South Dakota's really got it all. We have so much history here. I'm so excited to be a historian from here. We have Lewis and Clark. They came through here 1806. We had General Custer's last stand. Yes, that happened here. We are the home of the Sioux fame of Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. Yes, Deadwood. Hello. You've heard of Doc Holliday, Wild Bill, Calamity Jane, South Dakota, baby. Then you know us. So when these road trips that we talked about start happening in the late 1920s,
people went there. They went there.
He's like, come on. No, that's the problem. They didn't, because there's this road trip route from Chicago to Yellowstone that does that southerly route, because down there you've got all sorts of great stuff. You've got the Grand Canyon down there, sister. You've got warmer weather down there. And then you get to Yellowstone. So this poor guy's name is Dwayne Robinson, is like, come on, no, come up. Come up here to South Dakota. And so he says, I have this idea. I'm going to call it the Black and Yellow Trail. Ooh, come, all you people from Chicago going to Yellowstone, come this way on the Black and Yellow Trail. It's slower. You won't see the Grand Canyon, and we have no cities or commerce of any kind. Yeah. So then he was like, it's just not working. So he's like, we need a thing. Right. And he's trying to think of a thing that South Dakota can get, like any good American. We need a facelift. We need sizzle. We need zazzle. We need zazoom. Right. He's like, statues are the thing. Statues, big sculptures, not just in general, but in the 20s, girl. The Statue of Liberty is obviously our thing. The world fairs that are going and are so popular, the sculptures are like the biggest deal always at the fair. The Lincoln Memorial was only 2 years ago. That fucking knocked people's goddamn blocks off. And in the South, these Confederate states are starting to commission and build these crazy Civil War memorials, because that was ancient history also. That's also history, by the way, that the 1920s is like, phew, thank God that. And so he goes, Dwayne Robinson, to the South Dakota state government, is like, sister, we got to get a thing. We need a statue. And here's my idea. You know, those needles, it's one of these incredible rock formations in South Dakota. They're tall and like bubbly and cool. They kind of look like the legs of a Michelin man. And he's like, let's carve those into like Western heroes like Sitting Bull and Wild Bill, and people will like drive through them. And Congress is like, yay, yes. That sounds amazing. Here's some money. Man. And so the first sculptor that Dwayne Robinson goes to is named Laredo Taft. He's great. He's just done this 50-foot concrete sculpture that people have dug. It was of a Native American, and he called it the Big Injun, which was problematic.
That's
but they
tough. Yeah.
they changed the name since, but it's very cool. And he says no. He's like, I'm sick. I don't want to go to South Dakota. No, thank you. The second ask from Robinson goes to a sculptor who's 58. He's an American born. In fact, he was born in the West. He was educated in Europe. And this guy's like, hot damn, yes, I'd love to take this job. Wow. What Robinson doesn't know is that this guy is currently on the run from a huge debt he owes to the KKK.
That's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Now, this guy, I just told you a little sample. His life is crazy. This guy is unbelievable. This guy's a crazy, batshit crazy story, and he is the sculptor of Mount Rushmore. And you may have noticed I have not said his name yet. And the reason why I have not said his name is because I am curious to know if you have any clue who this guy is or what his name is.
I really don't. And I don't know if he's even done anything else, this person. No, I have no idea.
Because I've been doing an informal polling, and I haven't met a single person who has any fucking clue.
Yeah.
His name is Gutzon Borglum, which is a great name. It's a very memorable name. Gutzon Borglum. I usually don't like to do this because it's like, this is HILF, you know, it's the history we want to fuck. And most of the time I find people don't really want to fuck the like born in, mom was blah. But I'm going to give you a little quick drive-by of Gutzon Borglum's childhood, because I really think it gives us an important glimpse into not only who this guy is, but why we don't remember him.
Is he German?
His dad was Dutch, and he's Mormon. And he comes to, of all places, Idaho. And he comes with his wife, and they set up a life in Idaho. And then his wife's sister, biological sister, comes and lives with them. And he takes her sister, as his second wife. So now sister wives are literal sisters, okay? Gutzon is the son of the second mom, okay? And polygamy and Mormonism, problematic. And so when they are moving around from various places within Idaho, they don't say that this is his mom. They say this is the maid. This is the help. This is a servant of theirs,
Jeez,
right?
Oh man. Yeah, amazing.
And then when they're straight up like, no, for real, like polygamy and Mormon, like no good. And they're planning on moving to Kansas and Missouri, where they're like much clearer about like no polygamy, no Mormonism. Gutzon's dad takes his first wife and the kids and leaves the second wife behind.
Wow.
The second wife, of course, is Gutzon's biological mother.
Oh.
When I read this, man, and he never sees her again.
Wow.
There
no
was
child
a real
support there.
No. And a real like fiction rendered into reality is like a mainstay here. It's like, this has never been your mom. It's a servant. If that's what's convenient, if that's what gets us what we want, this isn't your mom. It's a servant. If that's what we need, and then we can also emotionally be like, and she's gone. It wasn't convenient for us. She's history. And we never speak of her. We pretend she never existed. This seems really important to me because his personality, the Gutzon Borglum, as he's described throughout, is that he just doesn't give a good goddamn what fact and reality are.
Wow.
He has this fantasy world of how things should be and how he wants them. And he basically forces everybody around him to like bend to his reality, no matter how ridiculous. Okay. When he's living with dad and first mom in Kansas, he shows some natural talent right away. And he goes to art school, and art school in Kansas leads him to LA, where he has an affair with his art teacher.
Wow.
Her name is Liza Putnam, and she's 18 years older than him. And they eventually get married, and she's his ticket to Europe. She's his ticket to the prestigious art world, right? So in the 1880s and 90s, man, when Doc Holliday, all this Wild West shit, Jesse James is breaking loose here. Gutzon, who was born in Idaho, born in that Old West, is in Paris, girl, in the finest salons, learning the most exquisite techniques. And he's also an American novelty. The reason anybody gives a shit about him is because he's carving cowboys, girl. He's carving cowboys and Indians and horses, and he's really good, and that's his jam. His bad luck starts when his younger brother, Solon, turns out to be like way better than him. Okay. Complicated because Solon's like, they share the same biological mom. So like he's a couple years younger, and he doesn't like follow a hot twat to get to Europe. He like goes there on his own merits by like being really good. And he's like winning contests and awards and commissions. And then Gutzon Borglum's marriage starts to fall apart. He's completely broke. His younger brother is showing him up in fucking Paris. And so he's like, fuck it. And he goes back to the United States and basically steps off the boat and declares himself the American Rodin.
Wow.
Right? And Rodin,
Big words.
Big words. Rodin he's not so much like aesthetically like him, but he's like, I'm the guy who's going to change the way fucking sculpture works here, man. I am the best. I am the chosen one. I was born in the West. I was educated in Europe, and everybody, you know what I mean? Like, step aside. And he does some good stuff. You know, he gets some good gigs. There are probably some of you, I always like to assume some of my listeners know way more about my subject than I do. Some are hearing it for the first time. If you have heard of Gutzon Borglum, you're in that small, you are like me. You read the thing when you went to the museum and it locks in your brain. Then you may have heard that he was a Nazi. People say, when they're really trying to like take a hot take on Mount Rushmore, they'll make a big, bold statement and say, the sculptor was a Nazi, or the sculptor was a member of the KKK, this Gutzon Borglum. And he has a very German sounding name. Mm-hmm. He crosses paths with the KKK, like for sure. But for whatever it's worth, here are the reasons why, if you're ever sitting around a cocktail party talking Mount Rushmore, who isn't?
Yeah, sure. Oh, yeah.
Right? And somebody's like, oh, Gutzon Borglum was in the KKK. Here's your hot take on why he was probably not. His first huge commission, you said you didn't know about his other works, right?
Yeah.
His first huge commission was of the Sheridan Memorial. And Sheridan is a Union hero. He is one of the biggest heroes of the Union side in the Civil War. It was dedicated in 1908, and it's hot stuff, right?
Right.
His other huge famous work is a bust of just Abraham Lincoln. And it was very emotional, and people loved it, and people would tour to come see it. And he named his son Lincoln after Abraham. These things alone make me think that he was a terrible Nazi. He was probably really disliked, like within the KKK. That being said, his other huge work, and the work that he did right before Mount Rushmore, is a Confederate statue in Atlanta, Georgia, called Stone Mountain. And it was commissioned by the Daughters of the Confederacy, and it was funded by the film Birth of a Nation, which is one of the most sacred films to KKK racist white nationalists around the world. That film is credited for creating the KKK in the United States, and it definitely funded Stone Mountain. Mm-hmm. But Gutzon Borglum didn't finish Stone Mountain. Gutzon Borglum took the money from the Daughters of the Confederacy and the KKK.
And he went on the lam.
And artistic differences and fighting and I want this and I need more money and the work isn't being done on time. They get into like heated arguments that ultimately end with Gutzon Borglum smashing the designs and skipping town. And he is pursued, man. Those are our designs. So if you've ever seen Stone Mountain, you're seeing the work of someone else, like another dude had to come in and like finish it. And it's pretty cool, but it's like interesting. So and their differences, by the way, were not ideological. Gutzon Borglum did not have any problems with like who anybody was. It was the same shit that we're about to hear more about, which is that he's just like my way or the highway. And he's kind of a lunatic.
Yeah. A true artist, really, maybe. or more
I think
a true criminal. I mean, because he must have this artistic side he needs to carve, and then he destroys at a whim.
Well, he's a true artist, I think, in the sense that, he feels incredibly passionately about his work. And he also has a real thing he wants his work to say. But I think the smashing of those designs was a fuck you. Mm-hmm. I will not let you have what I've made because you don't deserve it, because, you know what I mean? I think it was a real fuck you. Absolutely. Is. But like to say Gutzon Borglum is a Nazi is like to say Da Vinci was a devout Catholic. Like, I don't know. It was just who hired him.
I see. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we are going to find, we're going to follow this guy. We're going to find out how he got his titties from the KKK out there to South Dakota after this quick break.
Hey guys, Matt coming at you from The Real Drunks. Hey, if you're into movies, booze, craft beers, and just shooting the shit with your friends, join myself, Jake, and Alyssa on The Real Drunks on the Deluxe Edition Network and anywhere you get your podcast from. That's The Real Drunks, REEL, The Real Drunks. Check us out.
Before we climb back up that granite peak with Christine Blackburn, hey, a moment to celebrate those that keep me rock hard. My patrons. The latest to have their names jackhammered into the HILF annals are Joseph P. and Ashley J. Oh, and my patrons provide me with two critical things. One, the funds to keep the history coming, and two, the punch in the heart that tells me they care and want to be a part of it. And if you want to jump in bed with the pod, get in here. Come on, there's room for everybody. Go to patreon.com/HILF podcast and see how I can make your $5 a month worth your while. And if you want to support the pod, but you can't do so financially, girl, I get it. You can do a ton by leaving us a rating or a review, sharing your favorite episode, and of course, telling everyone you know to
follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow. Follow me, follow me, follow me, follow.
talk about great head, right? Like, if nothing else. I mean, if you're going to take a road trip to Mount Rushmore, you can always say the fifth head's on me, or, you know, there's a lot of great ways for roadhead to make its way in there. I mean that perfectly as simply as a public service announcement. But where we left off, we had met the sculptor, Gutzon Borglum. We find him, he's running from the KKK girl directly into a huge new gig in the middle of nowhere. Okay. And the first thing he does when he gets out there, you recall our guy, Dwayne Robinson, who had this great idea, has given him and the Congress the plan. He's like, okay, hey, sculptor, welcome. Here's kind of what we're thinking. Mm-hmm, all right. Mm-hmm. First thing Gutzon does is he's like, first of all, not these needles, these tall, skinny sculptures that are kind of all over the place. Hard pass. First of all, it's the wrong kind of rock. We're not going to be able to carve the shit the way you want it.
Interesting.
2, fuck your Western heroes. I don't think we should do cowboys and Indians and that kind of stuff. We should do national heroes. Let's make this a national monument, and let's put our presidents. You know what we should do? Our 2 best presidents, which everybody knows. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. Bam. And then he's like, no, fuck that, man. We're going to do 4 fucking presidents. We're going to do George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, who, again, I shrug and say, sure, fair. You, Christine, nailed it with just a little bit of nudging. And then that 4th one, Theodore Roosevelt. Even at the time, people were like, Theodore Roosevelt as the 4th one. Why? And they were like, okay, so George Washington, father of our nation, right? We got Thomas Jefferson with the Louisiana Purchase, man, expanded west. Boom.
Muy importante.
Abraham Lincoln, the defender of our nation, preserved the Union. And Theodore Roosevelt created commercial control of Panama. So you can agree, hardly fits with the caliber of these 3 other guys.
So what were they thinking? Who said that?
Well, here's why. Borglum suggested Theodore Roosevelt.
Well, he knows nothing. He's not even.
Here's the real reason for sure why Teddy got up there. There's 4 of them, really. 1, Theodore Roosevelt had just died 5 years earlier. And you know how it is. These fucks die. And even if they weren't loved, they are suddenly, that's all the good. We talk good only. And he was actually pretty universally loved. 2, South Dakota fucking loves this guy, right? Because, you know, he was named, the teddy bear is named after him because on these hunting trips, they would try to the idea is they tied a bear to a tree so that the president could have the privilege of shooting it. And he was like, you fucks. And he punished them and he let the bear go and was like, that's not how it works. And I was like, oh, and it made him the teddy bear, the cuddly, loving guy. He founded the national parks. I'm not saying Theodore Roosevelt sucks.
Right.
What I'm saying is, you know what I mean? It just doesn't seem like he can hang maybe with these guys.
Had he been a part of the South Dakota community?
He not like in his origin story, I don't think. But yeah, the West, I mean, the parks, the preserving these natural spaces.
The parks
South Dakota really loved him, but you know, it just was sort of this thing. But in any event, yes. Hey man, you know what? Why not? Teddy Roosevelt, if only because it marks our time in history. Great. We've got our 4 guys. Now
that's right. Okay.
You can appreciate though, for the South Dakota state government and even Dwayne Robinson, they are like, wow. Oh, and the other thing he said was not the needles, right? These needles aren't going to work. I want to do it on that Mount Rushmore, that giant 500-foot fucking cliff. It gets great light, which is true. He's like, the light hits it just perfectly for people visiting. Yeah. That's the one. And the South Dakota state government is like, yeah, I mean, wow, we love the scale, man. This sounds huge. But when we said we were going to fund it, we were like, the needles, maybe a few guys. This is obviously blowing us up. All right. And we don't know, we can give you some money, girl, but like, you're obviously going to need more than what we ever imagined.
Yeah. Yeah.
So primo problem. How the fuck are we going to do this? And as luck would have it, all right, this is in 1925, 26. President Coolidge is going to take his summer break in South Dakota. What goddamn luck. And so Gutzon Borglund's like, oh, I fucking know presidents, man. They love to give speeches and they love to come to opening shit. So even though they had already kind of had a grand opening, he was like, we're going to do a new grand opening, like a new sort of commitment to the work. I'm going to invite Coolidge and we're going to blow smoke up his ass and we're going to make him feel so important. And then it was like, Coolidge was like, nah, man, what about I'm on vacation, don't you get? I'm here to fish, girl. Also, okay. I am a one-term, I'm not running for re-election. I don't give a goddamn.
Wow.
Gorgon's like, fuck, this is my one and only way to get federal funding. Like, I've got the guy here. So he flies Christine a plane over Coolidge's lodge and drops a wreath in his yard with a note on it that says, from Mount Rushmore to Mount Coolidge.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so funny.
And Coolidge is like, that was kind of cool, dude. All right, fine. I'll come to your thing.
That is smooth. Yeah, very
He's
smooth.
Like, I'll come to your opening. And he goes and he gives a speech and Gutzman is like, yes. And you know what else? We'll let you make the inscription. So in my finished design, underneath the 4 presidents will be big enough to read from the same distance, your words, whatever you want to say. Right? And Coolidge is like, you know what I'm going to do for you, man? I'm going to sponsor this fucking bill. I'm going to when I go back to work, I'm going to get behind this and I'm going to support it for you. And he gets the money.
That's exciting. Okay, how much?
Well, at the time, it's $250,000. But specifically, and we'll get into this specific later, of matching funds. That means Borglum still got to raise at least $250,000 of private money somewhere to get it, right? This is the deal. No, but the money comes in right away, certainly enough to get started and to hire the people he's going to need to execute this thing. Now, I don't know how technically minded you are, Christine, but I'm about to get into how they built this motherfucking thing.
how they carved it, you mean to say.
How they carved it and but also how they built it, because they had to build some fucking infrastructure to even get the tools up there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So
was it
when
like
you're
scaffolding? I guess it was scaffolding.
some of it to get up there, yeah. But then, I mean, whenever you're building any kind of sculpture, I guess, and this is where this podcast I listened to was so incredibly fucking helpful. You start with a clay model first. So Gutzmann, when I say he's the sculptor, I mean, he makes the sculpture the way he wants it to look in every detail, right? Then you make a plaster cast of it, right? And then you put that plaster cast on your surface, stone or your wood or your whatever. People have been doing that for centuries around the world.
Like a mask almost.
Yeah. And when you need to transfer that, you don't just eyeball it. You use there's several different techniques depending on what you're doing. You can use this thing called pointing, which was developed in the 18th century. And it's where you sort of mark off the points. And that's where you kind of take it from plaster exactly. If you need to make it way bigger or way smaller, girl, then you're using compasses to enlarge. But this is not perfect for this, which is this mountain, this 500-foot mountain. How do you get in front of, how do I make this small sculpture into that? And
So
he
where do you begin?
finds,
Did you have to think about like pressure points, or is there, obviously there's engineering involved, but who tells him this is safe and this is not safe?
he hires a guy named Luigi Bianco from Italy who has some of that know-how as well, but you're exactly right. You have to know the surfaces. I mean, that's part of where this expertise comes from. How do you manipulate the surface? And he knows that the stone necessary to carve is actually way deep in the rock. So the first thing they have to do is blast away hundreds of feet of exterior rock to get to the good stuff that you can actually carve in this way, right?
The granite, or even not that?
Yeah.
Granite.
So there's sort of, there's layers of rock, and there's layers of, and to get to the layer that you want to carve, you got to blast away all of this other stuff. And so they finally get their way they're going to do their perspective, which involves this giant boom arm that swings out from the top of the mountain.
Okay.
And then a carver sits in a bosun's seat, which if you've ever seen those giant sailboats that have the people that hang from the mast and have their legs on the side of the sailboat when it's tipping and turning.
Like a trapeze?
It looks a bit like a trapeze. Yeah, the trapeze on the sailboat, exactly. And that seat is taken exactly from that design, okay? Wow. So this person is dropped down by a boom arm from the top of the rock, sitting in one of those seats with a jackhammer between their legs, okay? Jackhammering into the side of the mountain.
And that's plugged in with something, or maybe it's gas.
It's I think at that point it's gasoline. It is, they wouldn't have had electricity, capacity like that. I don't think possible. Space. They have a 3-person team basically doing this stuff. You have the carver, that's the dude in the seat with the jackhammer between their legs. You have the winchman, the person on that boom arm kind of lowering them up or down or getting them to the point that they need to be. And they can't talk to each other clearly because it's, in addition to being really far away, it's really loud and under the rock. So the third person on the team is the call boy that is leaning over the edge of the rock and communicating what they need to know between the two of them. And they do it in 3 stages. The first is blasting out all the excess stuff. Right? They do that with a series of holes. They do that twice a day, once at lunch and once after work, so that they know nobody's around, right? Then once they get kind of within a foot of the rock they know they want to use, then they start doing this honeycombing thing, where they get 1 inch or so holes, just make a bunch of little holes because that's easier to carve away. And then after that, it's the smoothing and shaping to make it exactly the way they want it. There were about 400 workers on the site over that 14 years, hanging over with the jackhammers between their feet. My question for you, Christine, is how many deaths
7.
do you think were a result?
7.
7, not bad.
Because it was in 14 years. This is every other year. You wouldn't think it's oh my God, this is happening every month. We better form a union or something. It wouldn't be that. It would be more like every other year. I mean,
that's pretty good. Those are pretty good odds.
400 people coming in. We're talking about a 20%. I don't even think that. I'm not good at math, but I say 7.
7. It was, in fact, Zero.
Bullshit. You
Can
led
you-
me to believe that.
I did. But it seems like that was the reason. It was not mischievous. I wanted to know how many people died because I couldn't believe there was. Look at these
Nobody
things. Yeah, I'm gonna. Come on. If you're going to see, if you go to my Instagram, you'll see the pictures of these fucking guys hanging off the thing. You
Oh,
think 14 years.
fabulous.
They have a jackhammer between their fucking legs in 19. At least 3, at least 1, none, 0. And there's a lot of reasons why, man. One is our guy Borglum was kind of a stickler for safety. He cared about
Interesting.
these guys. They were, he was like, nobody drunk, nobody sick, nobody hungover was allowed to work. He sent tomato soup apparently up to the workers every Monday morning just in case they were hungover.
These guys obviously were not the sculptors, but they were given jobs that, they needed help with. In other words,
They were skilled labor in the mines. This is a great place to get miners. So dudes that were familiar with explosives, with rock,
Wow.
with carving tools. And let's be honest, being in one of these bosun seats and having a jackhammer between your legs is still infinitely better than any other mining job that's available.
and
the money was good.
sounds hot. Just a little. I mean, just a
Totally
little
hot.
hot. Yeah.
Totally hot. Jackhammer between your legs,
Yeah.
making on George Washington's mouth, just like,
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
yeah, come on. And they liked it. They were stoked. They were like, look at us making a memorial. You know what I mean? Making a wonder of the world up here. This is awesome. And so they start, here's your date. So I told you 1927 is, oh my God, we got the money. We're going to blast this shit. Let's dance. Okay. 1934, George Washington's face is done. And one of the reasons we get that far, because as you pointed out, 1927 is right before the crash. In 1929, shit stops. Everything stops. And the money completely dries up. But this is also one of the best things for the Mount Rushmore, because I told you there was this matching fund situation.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Congress was like, we can't. This is an unreasonable expectation now. There's no way he's going to be able to raise $250,000 in private money. And the government is sort of in the business of like, let's get as many jobs as we can. And there's the Conservation Corps and there's the Park Service. And so they basically...
It's already started.
And it's already started. And it has become not a wasteful thing. People at the time were not like, what the fuck are we wasting all this money on when I can't eat and nobody can eat? People were like, that is a symbol of American greatness. That is the American spirit. Those are our guys. Like it had a really uplifting effect, and they leaned into that. So the Park Service now and the Conservation Corps basically have, it's not unlimited funds, but let's not worry. Let's just get this done. Let's just make this happen sort of mandate, which is great. So by 1934, which remember is still the thick of the Great Depression, right? George Washington's face is done. In 1936, they start Jefferson. 1937, they start Lincoln. 1939, they start Theodore Roosevelt. And between then and now, there are a lot of stoppages. It's not like it's smooth going. Every time shit stops, it's because Borglum's done some shit. He spent too much money. They're out of money. Everybody go home. And then they get more money. Something is approved. The Corps approves something, and they come back and they start working again. And this is like back and forth until 1941. Borglum dies. His son Lincoln takes over. He had already been overseeing it for a while. And by the end of 1941, they wrap it up. It's finished. This is October of 1941. They say, ta-da!
Wow.
And then in 1957, the Visitor Center is done. And we have essentially the Mount Rushmore that you know today.
Now, nobody can climb this thing. Is it roped off, or how is it set apart? Or is it just so high up and inaccessible?
It's pretty high up and inaccessible, and I'm sure it is as protected as any of the state parks monuments are in terms of video surveillance and motion sensors and stuff like that. But you ask about going up there. This is where our fuckery starts, Christine, because I told you that between 1933 and 1941, he'd run out of money, and then he'd get a bunch of money, and then he'd run out of, and it seems so counterintuitive given what I said. The Conservation Corps and the national parks were kind of told, Let's get
let
this
it
done.
go. Yeah, let's go.
So what the fuck is why can't they just get it done? It's because Borglum
was funneling money to Germany and his friends.
I wish. I mean, if it was that easy, you'd be like, fine. No,
what?
he
had a
he
heroin
has this-
addiction. No.
That would be great. That would have been a much better use of the money, to be honest. He has this big idea, okay? In his grand scheme, the way he pictured Mount Rushmore in its completion was all 4 presidents are complete to their waists.
Oh, wow. A 3/4 shot.
So it was a 3/4 shot. Exactly right. So that one thing was just the general face of it was going to look a lot different. But the other huge thing was the Hall of Records. So if you could climb up to these heads, Christine, if you and I could airdrop in or figure out our way up there, behind Abraham Lincoln's head, we would find a small cavern that is about 75 feet deep and has the etchings of tool markings all along the inside. And then there's like a small black inscription block thing on the floor that basically says the sculptor's name and stuff like that. That is like the seed of what he wanted. Borglum imagined a staircase, an elaborate like Parthenon style staircase that went so you could walk this grand, amazing staircase all the way up behind Lincoln's head. When you got there, you would see the grand entrance, carved doors with torches and a golden eagle.
Wow.
You would walk through an elaborate hallway with pillars and murals and the busts of all sorts of great American men.
Carved or just paintings?
Sculptures, paintings, carvings,
Wow.
very Egyptian meets Roman. It would also be where we would have duplicates and preservations of all of our important documents from the Constitution and Declaration of Independence to, eyebrows go up, the census records. There's some really, and they would be preserved on sheets of aluminum that would be encased in concrete. Okay. I mean, it really, you're like, oh my God. And the money, you can't imagine. And get this, I just described it to you, he describes it. And the Conservation Corps is actually like, you know what? Sure. I mean, yeah. We can start building that staircase. And Borglum says, no, you won't do it right. And that's one of the reasons he loses the funding. He doesn't get the money because he says no to the one group that has the money to do it because he doesn't think they'll do a large enough job. Unbelievable. And then the inscription. Remember I told you about Coolidge's inscription, right? And how the whole reason he got the national funding in the first place was because he said Coolidge could write this like dedication that would be engraved in stone and you could read it from the same distance. So Coolidge writes his thing and Borglum edits it, changes it, and rewrites it. And Coolidge is still alive. He's not president anymore, but he's like, what the fuck, man? And and even Congress is like, the thing, that we wrote said.
It's such a Trump move, yeah.
If Coolidge writes his own thing, then you get the money. So, and Coolidge is mad and alive. Let me say it again. So if you aren't going to do exactly what he wrote, then you're not going to get the money. And Borglum was like, well, fuck, then I don't want the money. You know, so this is why finally the Park Service just was like, bitch, finish the heads. And then we're going to get a nice exit ramp to this dumb shit. And it'll be done, right? And when it's done, girl, in October of 1941, right, it is 2 months later that the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor.
That's fast.
Which makes this yet again, sort of in the timing, a thing that people are like, but look what we can do. But look at how cool this is. And, you know, and even then, like that, some people would look at Mount Rushmore in 1941 and going into 1942. And to the extent that they thought about it, they were like, yes, that's good. That's good American stuff right there. That, of course, was never the opinion of the native people who lived there.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sure. It was their land and all that.
I mean, come on. And I told you I was going to tell you this story. And I also wanted you to hear the story up to the point, like before, because I think once you know the sort of white Western general perspective, actual history of this thing, you can completely understand why the native people were just like, jeez.
Yeah, man, oh man. You know?
I mean, it's really, because, at the beginning of our story, I told you this guy, Mr. Rushmore, is being guided through the territory and goes, what's that huge, obvious, beautiful thing? And they go, oh, it doesn't have a name. Of course it had a name.
Yes, it had a name.
Of course it had a fucking name.
Yeah.
Do you know what the original name of that mount is?
Lacuna Matata.
Oh, that was very well said. No, it's the Six Grandfathers, and it is a very
that's
sacred
ironic.
place.
That's ironic.
Right?
Is it named after those towers or those big, those big needle points?
The Needles were also a really sacred place to the same tribes. Like they also had a lot of their myths and legends, origin stories, and spiritual moments within a lot of their great leaders happened in and around these locations. That cliff where Mount Rushmore is, the Six Grandfathers, is the six directions. So not just north, south, east, and west, but also sky and earth.
Well, you see, that's the Native American part, right? That's nice.
Right. Now, we all know stolen land is a very general term because, of course, everything, the entirety of the United States
That's right.
belonged and was occupied and was habitated by human beings long before white colonial Americans came here. If that's new history to you, wow. Do I have several episodes for you to listen to? But in specifically, when I say these Black Hills regions was stolen land, we can make it specific even within a white colonial perspective because there was a treaty. The Fort Laramie Treaty in 1868 went through the United States government and said to white colonials, in our legal system, this land belongs to the Sioux Lakota tribes. It's theirs. Okay. And then we fucking broke that treaty 8 years later and just literally ignored it. Just took it. And here's Mr. Rushmore. And here comes Dwayne Robinson. And here comes ultimately Gutzon Borglum. And from the beginning, the Native people were like, we have so many grievances. First of all, we hate that you're here. Why are you here? Two, you gave us this shit treaty and then you broke this shit treaty. Then the monument you build here requires blowing it fucking up. And then the faces you put on there are not even the Western heroes, which would have been bad enough, even if you had included us in this monstrosity, was that you didn't just do the presidents. They're the worst guys. They are the worst guys. And yes, even Abraham Lincoln, because he oversaw one of the largest public execution in the history of the United States in 1862 of hundreds of Native American men who had in a riot. It is awful. It is a history I will cover another time. These guys hate these fucking guys. Okay. And there have been ecological and legal protests from the beginning. It isn't until the 1970s.
Yeah, isn't that unbelievable? First of all, we're only talking about 150 years ago. I mean, It's not that long ago to begin with. So now,
exactly.
In the 70s, what happens?
So in the 1970s, they finally start to get some foothold in the legal system where they're like, no, man, there was a treaty. We're not just, and this is not to diminish this idea, but in the eyes of a sort of ignorant white colonial, this isn't just Indian saying this is stolen land. We have paperwork here, man, that you signed, that you fucking signed, and you violated it. And it gets in the 70s finally. In the 1990s, Christine, the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Native Americans and is like, okay, and they give a huge financial settlement. That money was never accepted by the Native representation because they said, you're missing the fucking point, man. We cannot buy or sell this space. So you misunderstood us saying it belongs to us from us saying it doesn't belong to you. Yeah. And so there is this huge ideological ideological difference, obviously.
That's really difficult because our government is speaking a different language, and that language is money. And they're not hearing the land. They're not hearing about their space, their world, And
it makes it doubly complicated by the fact that one of the responses to Mount Rushmore from the Native American side is a monument, a response. They are presently building this truly enormous sculpture of Crazy Horse, pretty much not exactly on the other side of the rock, but like as a visitor goes, it's like in the same neighborhood, right? And Crazy Horse, the finished sculpture, the idea is he's on his horse and he is pointing
toward the Mount Rushmore.
And he is
wouldn't be.
87 and a half feet high. His face is done. And he's
Oh, I bet
87 and a
he's
half
hot.
foot high.
Did they make him hot?
He's bigger than George Washington, girl. He's 27 feet higher than George Washington,
That's
girl.
massive. Is he on a
Massive.
horse? Is he on a horse?
Not yet. Not
But
yet.
he will be.
He will be.
That's
so
going to be
he's
magnificent. No, but I like that. I mean, look, it's already, the history is history, but at least this is something. Is it? Is it something?
I think it depends on who you talk to. A lot. I mean, if you go to my sources, you can go to the memorial website and you can see how they're raising money, who's behind it, what their goals are, what their purposes are. You will very quickly find a lot of the same voices from an environmental and native, like, this is our sacred place perspective, say that this is just as bad. That there's no real difference, that it's being done and profiting Native people makes it feel better, but when it comes to the fundamental why Mount Rushmore shouldn't exist, it's the same reason why maybe this Crazy Horse Memorial shouldn't exist.
Interesting.
I think it's all fucking fascinating. And I will say this in parting is I think that whatever entity is picking through our history 1,000 years from now, to an extent, presently, I think Mount Rushmore is sort of silly. It's kind of a funny roadside attraction. It's gaudy. It's I don't know. It's not great. It's not my favorite, right?
It's dumb. That's what
It's
my
a little dumb.
assessment said.
It's a little dumb. Yeah. But I love it. I've been there twice. I'll go again. If you want to go,
that's
I'll
what
go with you.
I was going to ask you, why did you go back a second time? Because the first time was with your family, and it was the second time with somebody. Was it still your family? Did your family go twice?
No, this was with buddies. This was with my now husband and my best friend Amy, and we were going out to Montana. We went to Glacier National Park.
Wow,
from
nice.
from Minneapolis, and it felt like that. Yeah, you know why you stop? You stop because that is there, because it's Mount Rushmore.
That's right.
And I wasn't in a protesting frame of mind. I wanted to see it.
It is definitely of interest. That's why I brought it to the table. I wanted to tell you that every time I hear the song Rocky Raccoon, I will think of you and this episode, because the first couple of sentences are, now somewhere in the black mining hills of Dakota, there lived a young boy named Rocky Raccoon.
Hey.
And one day his woman ran off with another guy. Hit young Rocky in the eye. Anyway, but the first part, the black mining hills of Dakota, you don't hear that in a lot of songs.
Yeah, it's a real cool part of the country, man. It's a very neat spot.
It's very unique. Yeah, very
I
unique.
recommend truly, if you're getting through there, man, don't sleep on Mount Rushmore. Go if you want to, sneak in there in the middle of the night or get yourself in trouble, that's your business. But it's worth looking at. It's interesting. Even if you're going to look at it and be like, I hate this fucking thing. I hate everything it stands for. It's very big. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Those workers had a great time. We're best friends. That sounds fun. And then you can go home. And you don't have to go into the museum, because I've spared you that whole business.
And isn't there the Sturgis Festival is there, or close by,
Yeah,
right?
I think it is.
In the Black
it's once you're in the state. Now, keep in mind the scale of the state. Like, South Dakota is bigger than England.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting.
So you can't really be like, oh, I'm thinking somewhere in the state. It might take you, 2 days to drive, across it. But I do think, Christine, that in 1,000 years from now, when whoever is like picking through the artifacts of our time, I actually think that Mount Rushmore will be more important, because I think that it will be such a perfect epitome of what happened here in terms of white American, or in terms of white European settlement, movement west, how these people
two
moved
cultures
west,
came
how
together.
they,
This all
how they
happened.
saw
Yeah.
themselves. We did put our 4 biggest heroes up
Yeah.
there. It says a lot when you look at a culture. Who did they revere? Why did they revere them? I think that when we are able to back even further up from this, we'll find that Mount Rushmore encapsulates really what America is in terms of being big and spectacular and impressive and incomplete and a little messy and rendered from a suspicious motivation and yet feeding this constant inspiration. It's a very unique and strange thing.
It opens up conversation for sure. Mm-hmm. And did you say it's not completed?
Well, you could, like I said, he wanted to do the full busts. I mean, you can kind of see the collar of George Washington.
okay, I see.
And if you look at it, it looks, I mean, you can say artist's intention, but it's not done. It looks not done because
But in
it's not.
41, they said it was done.
Sure. We finished the heads and we ran out of money and Gutsa and Borglum's dead. We're wrapping it up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is all very fascinating. I'm so thrilled you really looked into it hard because this is great information that I would never have gotten through on my own. I just wouldn't.
I'm so grateful that you assigned me this smoker, man.
Hee smoker.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for all this information. I'm so happy. I'm so happy to get HILFed, and also I'm satisfied.
Oh, you know we aim to please. Aim to please, indeed. Oh, thanks again to Christine Blackburn. Check out her podcasts, and if you're in and around LA, make a point to see her live show Story Smash. Okay, you never know when I'll pop on stage with her. Links to her and all she does are available right now in the show notes. As for us, the next new episode is a journey to the land of Lemuria. Now, to some, this is a made-up place, a theoretical island proposed in the 19th century in an effort to explain the origin of lemurs. To others, Lemuria is a very real and literal place that we may not be able to see with 2 eyes, but might if we could only open our 3rd. My guest is Justin McHenry, the author of the book Lemuria, The True Story of a Fake Place. And it is really going to blow your hair back. Until we meet again. Our theme song was composed and performed by Kat Perkins. A reminder that you can find my sources, links to the books, documentaries, and articles I reference in the summary of this episode, or by emailing us, hilfpodcast@gmail.com, or messaging us on social media @hilfpodcast. This has been HILF, History I'd Like to Fuck with Dawn Brody. I'm Dawn Brody, reminding you that history is a party, and everybody's coming.